What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. Today, I'll be ranking every single NASCAR Cup Series racetrack heading into the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. I'll go through the worst to the best. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. In the number 28 position, I have Texas Motor Speedway. Texas Motor Speedway, in my opinion, is the worst track on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. Outside of maybe a couple times where I've seen okay racing at the track, this track has struggled. Not only have fans been against this racetrack over the years, but like I said, the racing itself at this racetrack has not been very, very good. And that's for all three series, not just the Cup Series, but the Xfinity Series and Truck Series have put on historically really bad shows. The IndyCar race the last couple years I think has been okay, but I just think the racing has not been good at Texas since they did the reconfiguration, which is a shame because I think the racing before the reconfiguration was actually pretty good. But nonetheless, I personally think that this is the worst racetrack on the circuit. The weather doesn't help it out either. They're moving it to April, which I think is a really good decision, but for me, this is my least favorite racetrack. In the number 27 position, I have Sonoma Raceway. This track just barely beat Texas Motor Speedway to be in the wars. I think the Sonoma does have one redeeming quality is that it's actually had a couple good races in the last 10 to 15 years. However, mostly for the most part, I'm not the biggest fan of Sonoma Raceway. It's my least favorite road course on the circuit. The races are generally pretty boring. I thought the 2023 edition was the worst race I saw, points main race I should say, I saw all year in 2023. And I generally just don't think the racing is that fantastic and great. That being said, it is a road course and it's just for me, my least favorite road course on the schedule in 27th. In the number 26 position, I have Richmond Raceway. This track is called the action track, but this track really is not that action-packed. You do get some really cool fuel mileage races that do have, which I think does help this track just a little bit. But the problem is the fan amenities, from what I understand, are not that very good. And attendance has been a big issue at Richmond Raceway over the course of the last few years. There was even some talk and chatter that Richmond could even lose a day a few years ago. And in my opinion, I would love to see Richmond be one of those racetracks that does end up losing a day. Like I said, the only compelling thing that this track does have is a fuel mileage racing. It is also going to get the spring Easter day, which again, I'm not a big fan of Richmond getting the Easter day, but for me, this just is not a track I'm not that big of a fan of, and it sits number 26 on my list. In the 25th position, I have the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. Look, I love NASCAR trying new things, and I think the racing the first year in 2022 was actually decent. But the 2023 edition race was really, really bad. It was almost unbearable and almost unwatchable. It was worse than the North Wilkesboro race, and I thought North Wilkesboro was very, very boring for the most part. The track, too many cars were on the track. I think it's good that NASCAR's in that LA area, and they need to be in that market considering the fact that Auto Club is not coming back. But for me and also the fan amenities, how much it costs for everything, I am just not the biggest fan. I do like it they try new things. I really hope they try something new, though, and maybe go to a different stadium in another part of the country. But in my opinion, I love it. They went to the Coliseum. I'm just not the biggest fan of the racing, and it sits number 25 on my list. In number 24 position, I have Phoenix Raceway. I'll be honest with you guys, I have never been the biggest fan of Phoenix Raceway. The only reason this is higher than some of the races below is because of the fan amenities. Phoenix, in my opinion, is one of the best fan amenity racetracks in NASCAR today. You ask a lot of people with the stuff that they did to the track in 2018, 2019, they did an amazing job upgrading the track. The infield, there's a lot of access to it, and that's one reason why this track is high. It also hosts a championship race, and I think that's one thing is the racing itself is generally not been amazing. I thought this year's race, the fall races at the Xfinity Cup race, were actually pretty solid, and maybe the 2021 edition was good as well, but I'm just not overall the biggest fan of this racetrack. If it didn't host a championship event, I'd probably have this race a little bit higher on my list, but because it hosts a championship race, I have this race sitting near the bottom of the pack in number 24. In the number 23 position, I have Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now look, I am extremely happy that the Brickyard 400 is going to be returning in 2024. But let's not get it twisted. Before we brought this racetrack back, was it racing good on the Brickyard track? No, absolutely not. Really, ever since the 2008 tire debacle race, there's not been a lot of good races at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I thought the 2011 race is very intriguing with a fuel mileage finish. I thought the 2014 race is very intriguing as well. And 2017 was extremely chaotic. Outside of that, though, I don't think this track has always put on the greatest racing. But I think this track could potentially get higher up on the list depending on how the racing is in this year's event. The next-gen car has excelled very well on tracks very similar to this, like Pocono. I think that could help Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but with the dirty air being a big issue, that might end up affecting the outcome of this race. Nonetheless, so I am very happy to see that Indianapolis Motor Speedway is, in fact, returning on the schedule, and I think there's a good chance that this track will end up getting higher on this list if the race is good. In the number 22 position, I have North Wilkesboro Speedway. For a lot of people get frustrated and mad at me, hear me out. I like North Wilkesboro. The problem is the first race back was not that very good. As much as I'm a Kyle Larson fan, I was really happy for him to win that race. Let's be honest, I don't know if it was just Kyle Larson's car or if it's the next-gen car issues, but we all know the short track racing itself has not been amazing with the next-gen car. They are going to be doing a repave to the track, which I think is also going to hurt a little bit. NASCAR is obviously looking for a solution to fix the short track racing. But like I said, it just was not a very exciting race the first time we came back. I will say the truck race was really, really good, which is one of the reasons why this track is not even lower than it is. But I think the first Cup Series race back at the track just wasn't absolutely amazing. I hope it's better in 2024. I will say the All-Star Open was good, but I think the first race back to North Wilkesboro in general was not as exciting, and that's why I have it 22nd on my list. In a 21st position, I have Iowa Speedway. Again, hold your picks for a second. I know that a lot of people are probably confused why I have this track really, really low on the list. The only reason I have this track really, really low is because there has not been a NASCAR Cup Series race hosted at this track at this point. There's a very good chance this track is going to end up way higher on this list when I do these rankings for 2025, if this track does end up returning in 2025. I think the next-gen car actually is going to put on some pretty solid racing. I'm very happy to see Iowa Speedway back on the schedule. IndyCar's had some pretty fun races at the track, and in general, I like Iowa Speedway. We just haven't had a NASCAR Cup Series race to the track at this point, and that's why I have it a little bit lower on the list compared to the ones ahead of it that we'll get into here in just a little bit. Nonetheless, I think Iowa's a good track. I just haven't had a Cup Series race, and that's why it is number 21. In a 20th position, I have Dover Motor Speedway. Dover Motor Speedway, in my opinion, is an okay racetrack. It doesn't always put on the best racing in the world. I will say the 2022 edition and even the 2023 edition were overall pretty solid and pretty good races at this track. However, historically, this track is kind of forgettable. The 2018 race is not very good. The 2021 edition of the race, despite the fact Hendrick Motorsports dominated, I don't think the race is that exciting and really, really entertaining. But I will say Dover does have a lot of fans that do show up. I wish this race a little bit later in the year when the weather's not a big issue, because weather's been a big issue at Dover for many, many years. A lot of these races have been rained out to Monday, which is something I think NASCAR does need to work on going forward into the future. Maybe moving it after the Coke 600 is something that NASCAR maybe could do in the future. But I think Dover, like I said, does have some decent fan amenities. A lot of fans do show up to the racetrack. There were some rumors that this track was going to go off on the schedule, but I'm glad to see that this track is back, and Dover, in my opinion, is 20th on the list. In the number 19 position, I have Worldwide Technology Raceway. This is, of course, my home racetrack, and I absolutely love this racetrack. However, I'm going to be real with you guys. The fan amenities are awesome, and the crowds have been absolutely amazing since the Cup Series started going here a few years ago. But I think the racing itself, despite it being my home track, is not the greatest in the world. It sometimes can get strung out, and it's very, very difficult to pass. That being said, I think these races have been decent so far. They haven't been amazing, but they've been solid and pretty good. I will say I think it could get better over time. I think, like I said, this year's race in 2023, the one that Kyle Busch won, was better than the one I went to in 2022. I think I've done a lot of great things with the racetrack, though. I'm glad to see it back on the schedule. And I think this track does deserve to continue to stay on the schedule long term. Nonetheless, this track is number 19 on my list. In the number 18 position, I have Michigan International Speedway. Look, the last few races at Michigan have been very, very good. However, before that, from like 2012 up to 2021, the races were not very good. It's finally starting to get back to groove, and it's finally starting to be the track that it used to be. The racing has absolutely gotten better over the last couple of years, but again, I still think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, especially when it comes to Michigan, to continue to make it much and much better. I think the track is getting better. The fans are showing up. Attendance has been better. I think this year's was the first sell the track has had in like 9 or 10 years, which is absolutely incredible and amazing. And I think Michigan is getting better as a racetrack, especially for the Xfinity Series. I think the Xfinity racing has been pretty good, and I do think the last 2 years have been pretty solid in pretty good races at Michigan. In the number 17 position, I have the Chicago Street Course. A lot of people are going to be surprised I have this race up as high because when this track first came into play, I was not a big fan of it. And I think the first race at this track was actually really, really good. However, a lot of the fan amenities got messed up at this racetrack in year number 1. Some big issues were the weather. Obviously, you had a massive monsoon that hit the racetrack that they could not really control. And let's be perfectly honest with ourselves. I think the Chicago Street Course race itself is a little bit overrated of a race. And the only reason a lot of people are excited about it is because Shane Van Gisbergen ended up winning the race. Would we be realistically as excited about the street course if Shane Van Gisbergen had not won? If a guy like Kyle Larson or William Byron would have won the race, I don't think as many people have been as excited about the race itself. But I do like the street course. It's not as great of a racetrack. I thought the Xfinity race wasn't as good. Nonetheless, so I will say I do like the street course a lot, but it's not absolutely amazing. It sits number 17 on my list. In the number 16 position, I have the Charlotte Roval. The first 2 years that the Charlotte Roval was around, I would have absolutely put this race inside the top 5 or even the top 10. 2018 to 2020, even 2021, I thought the races were really, really good. The reason that this track has dropped off quite a bit on the list over the course of the last few years is because the racing the last years with the next-gen car has not been very, very good. And there's also a massive push for the Charlotte Roval to be off the schedule after 2024. There's a lot of talk that this track wasn't even going to be run. They were going to have 2 Charlotte dates on the Oval in 2024, but that, of course, did not end up happening. Nonetheless, I think this track is pretty good at times, but I think the last couple years, hasn't been as good or fantastic. Nonetheless, the Charlotte Roval currently sits number 16 on my list. In the number 15 position, I have Pocono Raceway. This may come as a shock for a lot of people, but I think Pocono really over the last 4 or 5 years has really had a regun resurgence over the last 4 or 5 years. All the way back to 2020. I think the 2020 races at this track that were shortened up were really, really good. You had some fuel mileage races in 2021. You had Kyle Larson's tire issue that came up in 2021. You also had a pretty good race in 2022 where Denny Hamlin got disqualified. And you also had some pretty good racing in 2023 as well. This track has had a pretty massive and great resurgence, and camping's been a big thing. It's been at this racetrack, and fans are showing up more. Sometimes less is more, in my opinion, and I think Pocono Raceway has put on some pretty solid and some pretty good racing, and that's why it says number 15 on my list. In the number 14 position, I have New Hampshire Motor Speedway. New Hampshire Motor Speedway, in my honest opinion, is one of the most underrated tracks on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule today. The racing has been really, really solid since they reduced the track down to 1 day back in 2018. And I think every race at this track, maybe outside of 2023, has been pretty good. Now, weather has been a massive issue. They're actually moving the New Hampshire race a little bit earlier in the year. And I think that was one of the best decisions that NASCAR has made on the schedule for 2024. I think more fans are going to show up. I think the weather for the fans in general is going to be a lot better. And the fan amenities themselves in New Hampshire is really good. And attendance has been getting better in New Hampshire over the course of the last 2 years. Plus, it's had some really awesome and really fun fuel mileage races over the years. So therefore, it currently sits number 14 on my list. In the number 13 position, I have COTA, also known as Circuit of the Americas. I think all 3 Circuit Americas races, well, the last 2 years, I should say, have actually been really intriguing and really fun races. I thought the 2022 version was the best race we've seen at this track. You had a great finish. You had great racing up front throughout the event. You could pass. In the 2023 race, you had a lot of long green flag runs. Of course, it was the first race with the new stage procedure that they started in 2023 that lasted for a majority of the season. I think Circuit Americas in general has put on some pretty awesome and really fun racing over the course of the last few years. Plus, the fan amenities are second to none. It's basically the most modern facility That's in NASCAR today. Of course, Formula One goes there, which helps out quite a bit. But I really love Circuit Americas as a racetrack. I think it's a pretty fun track to go to, and I really hope Dakota stays on the track long term because it deserves to be there. Plus, he sometimes gets some really awesome and fun drivers show up that you normally don't see show up to NASCAR Cup Series tracks. In the number 12 position, I have Nashville Super Speedway. Nashville Super Speedway is a track that every single year the racing product in the track seems to get better. I think the 2021 edition was probably the worst race on this track and also had the traffic issues. But in 2022, the fan amenities got better and the racing got better. And 2023 edition race was probably the best race at Nashville Super Speedway since coming back. You had a lot of fun side-by-side racing, and Ross Chastain was able to pick up the victory in the 2023 edition. I think this track is really, really good. I think it's gotten better. The Truck Series races have been good here. The Xfinity races have been really good here. And the fan amenities are getting better on a year-by-year basis. Plus, staying in that national market makes a ton of sense. I wish it was a little closer to Nashville itself, but it's good to see the Nashville Super Speedways back on the schedule. I think it's a pretty solid racetrack. In the number 11 position, I have Atlanta Motor Speedway, or known as now Atlanta Super Speedway. Look, Atlanta Super Speedway, I think as a racetrack itself, is pretty fun. However, I think the 2022 and 2023 spring races were probably a little bit boring. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. But the summer races themselves were a lot better. And of course, I'm moving the spring of the Atlanta date to the second race of 2024. I think Atlanta Super Speedway racing has gotten better. You had a lot of three-wide racing, and I think the entertainment is there. Dale Jr. has said publicly, of course, that Atlanta is becoming one of the hottest commodity and hottest tickets in NASCAR today. I think it is overall a solid racetrack. It's not perfect at this point, but I think the racing is getting better, and I think it will continue to get better and better as time goes on, as it currently says number 11 on my list. In the number 10 position, I have Las Vegas Motor Speedway. A few years ago, this track probably would have been near the bottom of the list because back then the racing wasn't fantastic. But since the next-gen car came here and we had some decent racing with the 550 package as well and also some good racing with next-gen, I think that this track has definitely moved way up on this list because of that. I think the track has produced some pretty solid racing. I thought the fall 2023 edition was really, really good. And I think the spring and fall 2022 races were also very, very good as well. This track is definitely track sensitive for sure and weather sensitive for sure. But I think in general, Las Vegas is a really good market to go to. It's not that far from the city itself. And I think the racing itself at Las Vegas Motor Speedway has been pretty good over the course of the last few seasons. And I do like this track a lot. In the number 9 position, I have Darlington Raceway. Darlington Raceway is absolutely one of my favorite tracks on the NASCAR Cup Series circuit today. The Southern 500 has been a traditional race. It's been around for a very, very long time, and I think Southern 500 always puts on a really, really good show. And it's a track that requires a lot of skill to be able to run up on that outside wall and not hit the outside wall. But if you hit the outside wall, it's kind of like earning your stripes, because if you hit that outside wall, it's basically like something like, hey, you hit the outside wall, you're not trying hard enough. I love Darlington Raceway. It's a fun track. It's also tough on equipment as well. We see next-gen issues with the equipment here, and you sometimes get some crazy and big wrecks as well and some fantastic finishes in general. Nonetheless, I think it's a very fun and really exciting track to go to, and it sits number 9 on my list. In the number 8 position, I have Watkins Glen. Watkins Glen is absolutely my favorite road course on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. And outside of the 2023 edition, which is more of a next-gen issue than anything else, I think the racing in the Cup Series of this track has been absolutely amazing. A lot of side-by-side. We all remember the 2012 finish between Marcus Ambrose and Brad Keselowski. You had a great race in 2015 where it turned into a fuel mileage finish where Kevin Harvick ran out of gas and Joe Logano stole the victory. We saw Chase Elliott's first career victory come here. We also saw Kyle Larson get a win here. We've seen some really exciting and fun finishes here. And the fan amenities are great too. The camping's absolutely amazing. And I think this track puts on some really awesome and fun racing in general. Like I said, it's my favorite road course on the circuit. I love this track. I love the facility. And in general, it's a fun racetrack to go to. And it sits number 8 on my list. In the number 7 position, I have Charlotte Motor Speedway. A few years ago, I would have put this race probably near the middle to the bottom of the pack. But in the last 2 years especially, this track has skyrocketed in more ways to one. They've upgraded the Charlotte facility in certain ways. The fan amenities, from what I understand, are absolutely incredible and amazing. And the next-gen car has done an exceptional job at this racetrack the last 2 years. I think the Coke 600 has been two of the best Coke 600s we have seen in history of that event. On top of that as well, you have a really good crowd, you have great attendance, and like I said, fans show up. Even on the Monday when the race got postponed in 2023, the racing itself the next day was absolutely phenomenal. You have some controversy that happens, and like I said, I think it's one of the best tracks in the Next-Gen car ever goes to every single year. I love the track. It's a fun track to go to, and I love Charlotte getting the resurgence it deserves, and it's brought the Coke 600 back to where it deserves to be, which in my opinion, it's a really good racetrack. In the number 6 position, I have Homestead-Miami Speedway. Homestead-Miami Speedway is absolutely one of the best mile-and-a-half racetracks in NASCAR today. The racing is absolutely phenomenal. You can go up on the outside wall. You can have multiple grooves. You can use the bottom of the work at times, but you can use the high side to work. On top of that as well, tire wear is always a massive thing. You can lose 2 to 3 or 4 seconds of tire fall throughout a whole entire run, and someone can just come up out of nowhere and take the race lead. It is becoming Darlington Raceway very, very quickly. The track, I believe, has not had a repave in a very, very long time, and it should stay that way because, like I said, the racing itself is phenomenal and absolutely incredible. You have to be really skillful. It's fun to watch those guys run the outside wall, and I really wish this track was still the season finale because, in my opinion, Homestead-Miami Speedway 100% should be the season finale. They do need to upgrade to Phantom Minis here, which is why this is not higher on the list, but I think Homestead in general is a really good racetrack. In the number 5 position, I have Kansas Speedway. Kansas Speedway is my personal favorite mile-and-a-half track on the NASCAR Cup Series circuit at the moment. The next-gen car, every single race in the next-gen era has been phenomenal. You saw Bubba Wallace pick up his second career victory. That was extremely fun to watch. The spring race in 2022 is absolutely amazing. It had a great finish between Kurt Busch and Kyle Larson. Then both 2023 races were amazing. The spring one especially, I ranked as the best race in 2023. On top of that as well, you look at the Phantom Minis. They've been upgrading that so much over the last few years, and I think it has really helped in general, the general consensus of how great of a racetrack this facility is. I love Kansas Speedway. I almost went there in 2018. Even during the Gen 6 days, I thought the racing there was always phenomenal. You saw some fantastic and great finishes of the track over the years, and I really love going to Kansas Speedway, and I wish Kansas could host maybe 3 days, or maybe this track one day, if the weather got better, could host season finale. Nonetheless, I love this racetrack, and it sits number 5 on my list. In the number 4 position, I have Talladega Super Speedway. Talladega is an amazing racetrack for many reasons. Number 1, the racing at this track is always really fun and really amazing to watch. Number 2, the fans put on a fantastic show. In the infield, especially on Saturday nights where the Cup Series race happens, the infield is absolutely buzzing and amazing. And that's one thing I love to go is down to Talladega Boulevard and see all the chaos that happens down there on Saturday nights. I love Talladega Super Speedway. The obviously Eric Church made a song about this track because it's a phenomenal track. People go down there for the party atmosphere. There's a lot of things to be positive about Talladega Super Speedway. And in general, the Phantom Minis are really, really fun to look at. And this track is only going to get better and better over time. Despite the fact that this track is nearly 6 years old, it's a great facility. In the number 3 position, I have Martinsville Speedway. Martinsville Speedway is a phenomenal racetrack. I know the last couple races with the next-gen car, really the last 4 races, I should say, with the next-gen car have not been amazing. But that is more of a next-gen issue than anything else. A lot of people have said that this track feels like an old school high school football field. You feel like you're inside of a little stadium. It's not like Talladega or it's like Bristol or other tracks. You get that high school feel. They've also known for the Jesse Jones hot dogs, which are really, really cheap, but for when people say they're absolutely amazing and really, really good to eat. I love Martinsville Speedway. The track always puts on fun times. There's been a lot of great rivalries, and even during some of the races that have been the best in the next-gen era, I think you've seen some good racing there and some fantastic and fun finishes. Again, I think it's going to get better over time. Martinsville is an amazing racetrack. It's one of my favorite tracks, and it always puts on some amazing and fun racing to watch. In the second and runner-up position, I have Bristol Motor Speedway. Bristol almost became my favorite racetrack. It was almost number 1 on this list. I think Bristol is the best short track in NASCAR. I think the racing has been absolutely phenomenal for the last, really throughout the time as being a fan. I will say the racing at times hasn't been always the greatest. 2016 spring could be one of those that really wasn't amazing. But I think when they did the whole thing where they basically layered the bottom of the groove and had a PJ1 down there, unlike most tracks, PJ1 works exceptionally well at this racetrack, and I think both lanes work very, very well together. You get some solid racing. The Xfinity Series racing here is very, very good, and I think the next-gen car does put on some decent racing. Now, the 2022 edition of the race was actually pretty good itself. The 2023 race could definitely have been better for sure, but there were some solid battles and some solid things going on, and again, I just think this track, it's always got good fan amenities, a lot of fans show up, and the energy at Bristol Motor Speedway is absolutely amazing and absolutely fun to watch. So this track is amazing, and it currently sits second and runner-up on my list. And in number one, in the final track we're talking about, the number one track on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, no shock and no surprise, is Daytona International Speedway. I probably could talk all day about how amazing of a track Daytona International Speedway is. But Daytona, in my opinion, is the best track in NASCAR. Outside of a couple races in this car, I think it's just been a fantastic racetrack. You also have the Daytona Rising Project, which has absolutely really brought this track up. And people say that this is the best state-of-art, not only racetrack in the world, but it's the best state-of-art facility in the United States when it comes to stadiums across. NASCAR puts a lot of work. They're building a city around it. There's a lot of things you can do outside of the racetrack. You've got restaurants. You've got shops. You can even go to the beach as well. And you can go to the racetrack and have a lot of fun. And it's just the party atmosphere of going to Daytona too. And of course, it hosts the Daytona 500. And he always gets some fantastic and big stars in the world of NASCAR and in the world of racing who can show up as well to this racetrack. And Daytona is just an absolutely amazing facility, a great racetrack, and to me is the best racetrack in NASCAR. And I think it could still be the best track for many, many years to come. So that is going to be for ranking every single NASCAR Cup Series track for 2024. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, let's go live on my channel. Follow my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as for our Patreon as well. Link description below that, and comment down your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your favorite tracks on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule for 2024? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, you're going to have the Xfinity Series predictions for 2024. Then on Monday, there's going to be a special video dropping on the channel. There may be an updated Daytona 500 inch list for 2024, but you'll have to just kind of wait and see what ends up getting released. Then on Tuesday, there should be a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel, and we got a lot of great content dropping on the channel as we get closer to Easter. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.